There is no we.
For 1 year and 50 days, Come Along With Me was the series finale of Adventure Time. I suspected that the brand would survive, since it lasted on the air long enough to become nostalgic, but Cartoon Network has a tendency to not make direct sequels or spin-offs after a series has run its course, with a few exceptions. As of last month, they still turn down continuations from some of their biggest creators from back in the day. Plus, throughout most of 2019, Adventure Time content had a sense of finality. There was the complete DVD collection box set, the complete series score, and the complete ambivalence I had towards the announcement of Distant Lands. It wasn't a reboot, but instead a line of 4 44-minute specials, based on unproduced stories conceived during the original run. Each of them focused on exploring new aspects of different characters in mostly unexplored settings. This production went under the codename Rumblejaw before its official reveal, which was interpreted by other artists as a Goku knockoff riding a giant space tiger. Part of me wishes that it made its way into Adventure Time beyond a seconds-long cameo. If Frasier and an ancient psychic tandem war elephant can coexist in the same universe, then Rumblejaw could easily join them. These specials were spearheaded by longtime showrunner Anna Muto, and a small handful of returning writers and storyboard artists. But it offers a different, more streamlined flavor of Adventure Time to fit the new format. Getting more of one of my all-time favorite cartoons was the main reason I signed up for HBO Max. But the burning question I had going into it was the same one I approach most revivals with. Does it justify its own existence? Why even bother with a new limited series when there's already 283 episodes and one Minecraft special you can easily access by clicking over to another tab? I suppose it would be interesting to check them out in the wrong order and start with Distant Lands, but who would do that? I know the kind of people who would do that.
This is a pretty sick ride, I gotta say.
For this review, there will be light spoilers, and I'll be using still images for most of the visuals, as Cartoon Network can be pretty strict with copyright when it comes to Adventure Time-centric videos. Again, I would know. When the focus isn't on his history or identity, I personally think BMO's blunt, childlike nature works best in small doses, like in a throwaway line or scene. I wasn't thrilled to see that he'd be carrying the premiere of Distant Lands, but then again, he is a fan favorite for a reason. After his trek through space to farm potatoes on Mars is hijacked by a shape-shifting orb nicknamed Olive, BMO crashes into a diverse and densely populated space station known as the Drift. There, he's accompanied by Y5, a young rabbit scientist and scavenger who studies and assists BMO when he takes on the role of sheriff, assisting the locals and leader of this decaying society. This special set a precedent for Distant Lands by zeroing in on a new location with a familiar feel and taking place sometime before or after the events of the original. On top of the unique lighting and texturing, the hodgepodge of advanced technologies with pods containing organic environments made it distinct from the smaller, segmented kingdoms found in the land of Ooh. Part of me wishes that we get a spin-off that really explores every nook and cranny of this vast new setting. But lest we forget that it shares similarities to one of Cartoon Network's newest originals, Elliot from Earth. The Centrium featured in that show feels a little more urban and sophisticated, but it's got a similar layout, with various biomes connected to a bustling main hub. I'd accuse it of ripping off the BMO special if I was stupid and didn't know how animation works. Instead of using this space society as a jumping off point for one-off adventures, all of the robots, bugs, squids, and aliens that BMO and Y5 meet early on return in the final act, so no interaction is wasted.
BMO, that was incredible. You single-handedly saved everyone.
The variety in both tasks and characters that this pair encountered reminded me of a Nintendo 64 era 3D collectathon platformer. I had a blast combing each scene for familiar species, and even enjoyed the guest animation by David Ferguson of Water Park Prank fame. Well, fame probably isn't the right word, but his unique style fits a brief flashback displayed on a primitive computer, as opposed to a full 11-minute episode that's quote-unquote canon. The writer's words, not mine. While BMO nails its presentation, this special has one fatal flaw. I thought it was kinda boring. BMO himself didn't feel out of place in a high-stakes story, but to me he was the least entertaining aspect. It didn't feel like we learned anything new about him besides getting a glimpse into his past, even though BMO's goofy and introspective moments were charming as usual. I did find Y5 interesting, because her journey to define her identity independent of her parents incorporated minor LGBTQ themes with how she chose a new name for herself. They implied a connection without actually confirming anything, but by doing that, I think it makes Y5 appeal to a wide range of communities.
No, Y4.
My name is Y5.
On the downside, Y5 is held back by being yet another Adventure Time character with bad parental figures. Even though they make fun of how often kids call out their deadbeat parents on this show, Y5's arc feels less sympathetic when her parents are comedically neglectful and oblivious until the ending. The two antagonists feel underdeveloped. One is an admittedly fun red herring who acts as an Easter egg for longtime fans, and we're told that the other is evil more than we actually see him doing evil things. If the plot was tightened up to give a little more depth to a few characters and got rid of predictable aspects like a cliche third act breakup scene, then I would probably still find it alright. For Adventure Time fans, I think this is ultimately worth watching for how it expands the canon beyond the land of Ooh. But how much you'll personally enjoy this comes down to your opinion of BMO. Then again, if you want to see the little guy get ripped to pieces, then this is the special for you.
I think I'm dying. But that's okay. Bimo always bounces back.
Alright, before covering the next episode, we need to switch gears and talk about something serious. This video is brought to you by Manscaped, the global brand for men's grooming and hygiene products, who sent me tons of stuff from their Performance Package 4.0. We got the Lawnmower 4.0 body trimmer with a cordless charging system, LED display, and travel lock feature. We got the Protective Crop Preserver ball deodorant and the Cooling Crop Reviver ball toner spray. We got the wireless Weed Whacker nose and ear hair trimmer. We got 2 free gifts available for a limited time on top of everything else: the Shed travel bag and the Manscaped anti-chafing boxer briefs. To get the right tools for the job, go to manscaped.com today and get 20% off plus free international shipping plus 2 free gifts when you use the promo code NICKtendo in all caps at checkout. Thanks to Manscaped for sponsoring this video. Webster's defines Obsidian as a dark natural glass formed by the cooling of molten lava. There, I explain what the title means because the special itself didn't do that. I completely understand if anyone was disappointed that Marceline and Princess Bubblegum's long-rumored relationship only became official in Adventure Time's finale. Exploring queer relationships in children's animation was relatively taboo prior to Steven Universe depicting the first same-sex marriage on Cartoon Network. And even now, there's still some restrictions. I believe Come Along With Me was produced before this despite being aired a few months after Reunited, so the creative team had to wait a few more years before they could properly expand on the relationship between these two characters. Marceline is tasked with slaying Molten Larvo when the dragon is accidentally unleashed onto the Glass Kingdom. However, she's forced to confront her past, both with Bubblegum and her mother. The first half is a really strong start. The prologue establishes the scale of the conflict and the major players, but doesn't overstay its welcome. We get a nice glimpse into the casual lives of Marceline, Bubblegum, and Simon before danger arrives on their doorstep. Showing the flashbacks in reverse order is a creative storytelling choice, and the opening titles have a very cinematic presentation to them. Woke Up is the standout song for its intense backing track and for allowing Marcy to show off a punk side of her music that we only got glimpses of in the past. Although It's Funny is my favorite for never losing steam and always catching me off guard with its intro.
Boo. I'm sorry. Did I scare you?
Yes! There's a few things that bother me throughout the entire runtime. Like the royal advisors of the Glass Kingdom were basic strawmen who I didn't think were very funny. I was more so distracted by how one of them had the same voice as Cleveland Jr. from The Cleveland Show.
Come on, now's your chance to act!
Thank you for your service, at Cleveland Jr. on Twitter. There's also the plucky and spirited Glass Boy who puts all his faith in Marceline to save his kingdom. I like how he parallels the young Marcy we see in flashbacks, learning the same emotionally repressive lessons as her, which briefly lead the kid to rebel. With that being said, Glass Boy got on my nerves, whether or not he was meant to.
Tell them, Princess! Princess! Tell them! Tell them! Princess, tell them!
I kinda wanna step on him to smash his vocal cords, but you know. This special also introduced a new composer, Amanda Jones. You probably won't notice a difference unless you keep an ear out, but I thought her mostly traditional orchestral score was a sharp departure from the lo-fi, genre-defying sound that had been established for over a decade. I found myself thinking that a joke would have played better without a music cue, or that a theme didn't fit the vibe of a character, like giving Choose Goose a generic medieval sound.
A boy with a head crack.
Hey!
Motheling, motheling.
To be fair, this was the composer's first foray into animation. It was produced during quarantine. Her score for Together Again had a better grasp on the show's musical style, and she has an Emmy nomination for composing, and I don't. So don't take my opinion on this as fact when YouTube will demonetize me if I play more than a few seconds of audio as an example. You know how it is. Get the show on, get paid. Steve from Smash Mouth.
Hey, wait a minute, aren't you Steve from Smash Mouth?
Yeah, I am.
The second half of Obsidian has some moments that I truly love. The flashback where Marceline's mother, Elise, realizes that she can't provide the protection that her daughter needs is heartbreaking, and her final message allows a character with only a few moments of total screen time to leave a lasting impact. Marceline opening up to Bubblegum as the pair accept their fate in the Glass Kingdom's furnace is another powerful moment, albeit one that's delivered through blunt dialogue. It's enhanced by Marcy's vulnerable ballad Monster, another addition to a mostly solid roster of original songs. However, I have some issues with how this section was structured. Once Marcy flees the Glass Kingdom, her soul searching is interrupted by flashbacks and a subplot that distract from the impact of critical developments. There's no time for Marceline or the viewer to immediately reflect on anything, because the story has to keep moving. It's cool that Marceline's self-actualization is mirrored in more than one character, but the time spent making those connections clear takes away from the core relationship of the special. Bubblegum barely gets to have an arc of her own. The biggest change that the princess undergoes is that the soda she shoots from her hand is now red instead of brown, so it doesn't look like Lorville gets covered in feces. Hashtag release the poop colored cut, you cowards. You cowards is not part of the hashtag. Apart from a few slightly irritating characters and wonky plotting, Obsidian was good. I think it could have been expanded into a proper 8-part miniseries and had a structure reminiscent of Stakes, where one episode contains most of the flashbacks. As is, it falls short of feeling like classic Adventure Time, because it tried to cram so much about its protagonist into such a short amount of time. It lacks the cohesion that would give it staying power. Like, I genuinely forgot that adult Finn, as well as Jake's daughter Bronwyn, made cameos until I rewatched it. I wonder what happened to that Jake guy anyway.
Jake!
Together Again was announced as the final chapter in Distant Lands, but it was produced as the third, with Wizard City being ordered later in production. Since HBO Max had to keep that content coming during the pandemic, these episodes were released in production order. This discrepancy is probably the cause for why the versions of Peppermint Butler we see in the last two specials kind of contradict each other. But then again, who knows how many years have passed between them. Technically, Together Again is the finale to this limited series, and it's the only one to begin with the original Adventure Time intro. The bumper that plays in front of these specials always did a good job getting me hyped up, despite featuring characters who never appeared. This one opens with some sort of flashback, where Finn and Jake stop yet another Ice King princess kidnapping. But the visuals look off, the slang is forced, the pacing is strange, and it feels like a parody of a season 1 or 2 episode. Given my shaky experiences with Distant Lands, I took this pale imitation at face value. But then I noticed some out-of-place cameos, and all of these skeletons look familiar, and why is Jake slowly moving towards a grave, and oh! All my favorite characters are now dead and trying to find their place in the afterlife. You can't have an ending more definitive than that. With how much emphasis was put on Finn and Jake's past incarnations, I shouldn't have been so surprised that this is where their story would end. Adventure Time loved death, so much that it personified the concept. And this here was an excuse to flesh out the dead worlds that we had gotten glimpses of back in Death and Bloom and Sons of Mars. After he dies, Finn seeks to reunite with Jake in the 50th Dead World, but the pair must stop the realm's reckless ruler, New Death, from cutting off reincarnation. I think this is where the creative team finally figured out how to make a 44-minute version of this show, because the pacing was smooth, the callbacks didn't feel like nostalgia bait, the creative locations didn't distract from the plot, I was invested all the way through, and the dialogue felt a little more modern, but still right at home coming out of Finn and Jake's mouths. This is the finale that I never knew I wanted. Showing Finn interacting with Jake's parents on screen, rectifying the underwhelming death of a long-standing antagonist in an excellent twist, pitting Finn and Jake against each other in a stylish and heartfelt final battle, giving Tree Trunks the polycule she rightfully deserved, and expanding on random side characters like Life, Mr. Fox, and Tree Trunks' ex-husband Wyatt. Wyatt is objectively the worst person alive.
Mr. Eel, pity me!
I was also pleasantly surprised to see Tiffany be taken seriously as a character and get some more attention, since he was a jealous joke introduced in season 1, who kept defying death and returning in increasingly ridiculous roles. Tiffany's inclusion complemented the bond between Finn and Jake that was at the heart of this story, since he was an inverse of Finn, who could have led Jake towards a life of crime instead of heroics. A brand new character could have taken his place, but he's an example of how this story benefited from entirely focusing on characters, or variations on them, that we'd already gotten to know over 10 seasons. Together Again feels complete. It's what I wanted out of an Adventure Time sequel series. Definitely one of the best pieces of animation to come out this year.
I love it.
Oh yeah, there's still another one of these. I came into Wizard City with the knowledge that it would be a fun extra instead of a proper final chapter, but the creative team built a captivating cast and conflicts that easily made this one of the best of the bunch. After being dumbed down in the penultimate episode of the series, Wizard City has the newly minted Peppermint attend Wizards Academy to relearn magic and escape from his dark reputation, only to be forced to confront his past when he gets wrapped up in a deadly conspiracy on campus. Peppermint carries the soul of his past incarnation, who appears here as a purely antagonistic force to the wizard in training. Personally, I preferred whenever his dark side would seep through his stern exterior, but now, Peppermint Butler is Peppermint's dark side, so we don't quite get that same contrast. Still, trying to forge a new path and break away from your legacy is the perfect theme for Distant Lands to tackle. It's the through line that makes the otherwise selfish Peppermint sympathetic. To liven up this increasingly dark story, the Candy Kid reluctantly befriends Abracadabra's niece Kadabra. She has a fun backstory of being a wizard who would rather perform parlor tricks than cast spells. Besides some of Jake's kids, Adventure Time didn't have too many well-defined young female characters, and I like that she gets to be weird and have big takes. In terms of design, Kadabra is a less restrained version of Y5, and I like her long and droopy hair. Reminds me of Connie's early designs in Steven Universe. Despite being Peppermint's support system, she becomes a powerful wizard in her own right, breaking out of the sidekick role that could have defined her entire character. Kadabra is pressured to learn magic the proper way by not just her mother, but also Abracadaniel. So good on them for really mixing it up with that trope. Unlike Y5's parents, we've gotten to know Abracadaniel as a nervous wreck through thick and thin. Plus, in the opening, he basically sees Chuscoos get murdered at the school his niece attends, so you can't blame him for being a little high-strung.
Hey, they only laugh because you're different.
I know.
So stop being different!
Steve Little's audio for Abracadaniel and Peppermint Butler sounds off, like he didn't have the proper equipment or noise reduction when he recorded at home. I'm starting to notice this problem in other cartoons produced during quarantine, like Q-Force on Netflix. Maybe this is the reason why Steve Little's other character, Bufo, was recast as Bill Hader.
Free powers for all. Want some?
Lesson 1. Eggs.
I can say the same about Elise, who isn't voiced by Rebecca Sugar in Obsidian. However, casting a black actor to play the black character is a sensible move. And her new VA, Erica Luttrell, played Sapphire in Steven Universe, a character partially modeled after Sugar herself. So I think that situation was handled well.
No, Marceline, sweetie, it's nap time.
You're a regular cartographer, Marcy.
Since Wizard City appeared a few times in the original series, the setting isn't as fresh or exciting, but the backgrounds are still populated by a wealth of familiar teachers and students, as well as graffiti written by kids who haven't learned how to swear yet. My favorite is, Plaid Chad the Bad Cat Lad had a sad dad. Where's his Distant Land special? Crafting a playful, mysterious mood is a low-key soundtrack with lots of variety in the instrumentation and genres. It has a uniform sound, which is impressive considering that it had 3 new composers at the helm. One was vocal artist Half Shy, whose experience writing Adventure Time fan songs paid off with these specials. The other 2 are siblings who have experienced scoring animated short films, including Pops and Branwell, a highly underrated pilot from Distant Land storyboard artist Alex Senwald. Maybe I'll cover it sometime in another video about pilots. Or not. Probably not. There's plenty of notable side characters we get to know well. There's Pretzel Hair Lady, Pillhead, Brain Wizard, Boy Who's Transformed into a Rock, Barista voiced by Dana Schneider, and Weaponhead. And I only made up some of their names. One of the cool kids that Peppermint tries to impress, Blaine, is worth mentioning because they're Adventure Time's first non-binary and gender-fluid character. It's nice to see that casually normalized, even in a high fantasy cartoon like this. Although I wonder why this was the character chosen to be a narc.
My uncle's a cop!
No one likes a rat.
Now a wizard school that hides dark secrets reminded me of OKKO's Point Prep Arc, or the Hexside episodes of The Owl House, and absolutely nothing else. Especially not the twist, setting, and ending of the first 2 books of that series that doesn't exist. This special loves misdirecting the viewer about its underlying mystery. So many characters are framed as suspects, including Peppermint himself, and while the payoff is a farce, this storyline is dense enough to still have rewatchability. If I was shocked by anything, it's the number of on-screen deaths and child murders. They definitely took advantage of the slightly relaxed content restrictions on streaming. Wizard City even ends on a cliffhanger, involving a character who was the glue holding these specials together. At least 3 of them anyway. Now I feel completely justified in putting BMO at the bottom of my ranking. I don't think a second season of Distant Lands is in the works, so I'm curious what this scene was foreshadowing. Maybe it's one of those loose ends that was never meant to be tied up. Like how the last Fiona and Cake episode alluded to those characters possibly being real. It's just something that we'll never get a proper conclusion to. Or maybe not! Adventure Time Fiona and Cake was announced 2 weeks prior to the debut of Wizard City, and it's set to be a limited series of 10 half hours focused on Simon Petrikov dimension hopping and encountering a new antagonist. I'm eager to see how these episodes expand upon this consistently questionable alternate universe, especially with this being aimed at young adults. However, my big takeaway from this news is that Adventure Time doesn't end with Wizard City. For me, it's always weird to see a show you love expand into a franchise, because the success or failure of one installment can complicate your feelings on everything else. Luckily, I think Distant Lands is a worthy follow-up for giving closure to plot points hastily inserted back in season 10, or closing the book on Jake the dog and Finn the human's adventures. I'm glad that it didn't sacrifice experimentation for the sake of being marketable, like how the Simpsons movie wanted to appeal to normies who didn't know what Moe's Bar was. Instead, they gave speaking roles to characters like the unforgettable butt salesman Maxwell Lipton, who appeared for 7.2 seconds in season 5, episode 53. It took half the run for this team to find their footing with a format that lasted longer than 11 minutes, and that's because said team mainly consisted of new blood. Plenty of key creative staff members migrated from Steven Universe Future, or OKKO Let's Be Heroes. You can see it in the more dynamic action, the rare off-the-wall joke, or a cool-ass appearance. Creator Pendleton Ward is no longer around to enforce how the characters are drawn. So quick, draw everyone's eyes with sclera! Go, go, go! While there's some room for improvement as this staff hopefully continues to find their own identity, I think BMO, Obsidian, Together Again, and Wizard City are all worth checking out to some extent. Fingers crossed that the Fiona and Cake limited series keeps the same momentum. Even though Cartoon Network would like you to believe otherwise, Adventure Time is dead. Long live Adventure Time!
I'll just come back for fun. Because it's great being alive with you.
Good reason.